Thank you for lunch, by the way. I appreciate that very much. The last teaching that I'm doing today is going to be on something that, the reason why I'm doing this, I wanted to show you a sequence of events. Like I mentioned earlier, everything about God defeating death. I think we pretty much covered that. Which now would explain why we need the red heifer to restore the temple. Okay, so I did that whole thing just to get here. Right now, the red heifer thing has become a big topic of argument, discussion, like everything else is always in the movement. What concerns me the most was the great amount of comments that I saw, not from Christian people, because I understand a lot of the Christian brothers and sisters, they're not aware of temple protocol, but more so, all of the Hebrew roots Messianic people saying some ridiculous stuff about the temple. And I'm sorry, we have to draw a line. You know, look, there are certain things you're not used to hearing. There are certain things you're not aware because you may not have the time or the interest to study them. So my recommendation is consider listening to those people who study these areas to give you more clarity on them, instead of assuming on things we don't know. Today and yesterday, we found out a lot of stuff, right? So if I'm going to go through the whole line of questioning and teachings that I did, how many new things did you learn that are actually in Scripture, but you didn't quite understood its content? Okay, so when it comes to the temple, how often do you really study the area of study? So therefore, it's difficult to come to a consensus of opinion on something that we really never look into. And I don't think that's it's a fair thing to have many comments or be concrete about matters that are not being researched. I think it creates a really it creates a lack of credibility when we continue to comment on things that we don't really know. And this is the one thing that I've learned the last 12 years is to do my best to validate whatever I have and whatever is my opinion. I make it clear so you know that you can argue with my opinion. It's okay because you're entitled to yours. But when it comes to things of law, matters of the temple and holiness, there's a certain structure and an order that we must follow. And sometimes we try to accommodate God's kingdom to our worldview, and that's the problem. And that's when we fall into cult-like attitudes, in which that if you don't see it my way, then I'm not going to talk to you. I thought we got out of that a long time ago. The temple is actually the most controversial topic within our movement. How do I know? Because the feast, isn't it controversial? Passover, isn't it controversial? The new moon, isn't it controversial? The priesthood, isn't it controversial? Sacrifices, controversial? Tithing and offerings, controversial. All of that is related to the temple. So let me get this straight. And I will challenge you in a way, I think we kind of build a rapport that I can be honest with you, be straightforward with you about the area that I do have a handle on. I don't know everything on it, but I have a handle on because I've been studying it for 23 years, and I'm still got so much more to learn, but I'm willing to dig more into it. Yes? So what I want you to do is consider listening to it, validating it, verifying it, and then consider going to the resource that focuses on those areas. It's like you going to okay, we have a lawyer in the house. Where is he at? There you are. Okay? So, you know that if a guy, criminal law, do you practice criminal law? Okay, but you know it's very different than civil law. Okay, so would you hire a civil law, a lawyer to handle criminal law? Not if you want to win. But wait a minute, I don't get it. They're lawyers. But there are different roles of law that you practice, correct? So why do we go to people who never study the temple, don't know anything about the temple, to learn about the temple? When I study archaeology, I go to the archaeologists. That's what I do. That doesn't mean I endorse all the beliefs of the archaeologist. All I care is about his research. When I go to things of matter of Judaism, I want to find out directly from Judaism. So I know what they think, what they say, so I'm not misquoting them, so I can still present my point using their proper interpretation, not using the Talmud or the Mishnah for my convenience when it pleases me. Because many people say, well, the Talmud says, well, have you read it? I mean, 90% of the Hebrews never read the whole Talmud. I haven't, and I've been studying it for 20 years. It's so difficult. It's legal arguments and it's opinions, and one guy says something over here that's completely crazy, and then later on you have another rabbi saying, hey, do you hear what that guy said? He's nuts. You don't do that. Because it's the Gemara's opinions. It's an opinion. Mishnah, however, is more legal rulings with the Sanhedrin Council. The way they handled certain things in the temple, that's different. So the Talmud is the opinion, the Gemara on the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is based on the commandment. Did you know that? There are different rules and regulations of interpreting law. Like he said, there's civil law, there's criminal law. If you want to win, you don't go to a civil lawyer for criminal law. So let me ask you this. Sabbath, is it holy? The feasts are holy. The name is holy. Sacrifice is holy. The temple holy? Then why are we allowing people to defile the holy things by their interpretations without any merit or any research or scholarship? It's only fair. It's a fair statement. Now, I'm not saying that I believe everything Christian people tell me, or I believe everything Judaism tells me. Well, at least I bother to look into the research, and then I use Scripture and I balance it out. Okay, which one lines up with the Bible? An archaeologist said one time to me, and it resonated. He says, if the archaeology contradicts the Bible, check your archaeology. Because the Bible is always right. That is so powerful. If something in Judaism says that agrees with the Bible, I don't have a problem with it. Just ask when Christianity says things that lines up with the Bible. Would you agree with that statement? So why do we have to pick and choose on both sides? It's like a team. Well, you wearing white and I'm wearing red. You must be the bad guys, I'm the good guy. The Red Heifer is going to create such controversy. Forget around the world, that's without saying. But worse, us. Because we refuse to study the temple. Trust me, I get attacked every day. It's constant. It's so sad. Because all I want to do is share with you from the temple how we can come closer to God. Because we're going to the garden. The garden is the temple. And the millennial reign, there will be a temple. So how are you going to conduct yourself in God's house? So what we're trying to do is teach you, because it says it. It's a command. Can you read Ezekiel 43, please? Ezekiel 43. So I'm going to tell you about, I got it right here. 43, verse 10 to verse 12. If you only knew how much flack I get for reading these verses all the time. It's sad. I want you to think about what the word says. This is God speaking through the prophet Ezekiel. The Lord speaks here. And I'm only trying to obey what the Lord says. Go ahead.
Son of man, describe the temple of the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them bend their captives. And if they are ashamed of all that they have done, make known to them the design of the temple in decoration, its exits and entrances, its entire design and all its ordinances, all its forms and all its laws. Write it down in their sight, so that they may keep its whole design and all its ordinances, and perform them. This is the law of the temple. The whole area surrounding the mountaintop shall be most holy.
The mountaintop shall be most holy. And you know the expression for mountaintop, most holy, is Kadosh HaKodashim, like holy of holies. And we have people changing the temple to the city of David over here. Right? Now, God spoke to the prophet Ezekiel and told him, this is the way it's going to be. Now, you may not understand, you may not think it's relevant. Yeshua's resurrection does not do anything away with the temple protocol and its principles and its purpose, because it's still the throne of God. Read verse 1 through verse 4, please. Yes, sir?
Afterward he brought me to the gate that faces toward the east. And behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the way of the east. His voice was like the sound of many waters.
Okay, so the glory of God, right? The presence of God came to this temple that people calling the temple of the Antichrist. That's what they're saying. That whatever temple comes in is a temple of the Antichrist. If they're not believers in Yeshua, it's not legitimate. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. It's like me saying, if you're not a believer in Yeshua, you cannot operate on my hip. Or if you're not a believer in Yeshua, you cannot serve my food. Do you require that when you go to eat somewhere here? Are you a believer in Yeshua? Because I can't eat unless you are a believer in Yeshua. Come on, we got to that extreme. Like, would I would like for all of them to believe in the Messiah? Absolutely. But does that mean that God called them to the priesthood? In the book of Leviticus, they were called to the priesthood. They were anointed, dedicated, and ordained. And nowhere does it say they need to believe in Yeshua to do their work. You need to separate one or the other. Now, mind you, please understand that for me it will be amazing to know that all of those priests will believe in the Messiah, because that's the ultimate goal, yes? In Acts chapter 7, verse 6, it tells us that the word of the Lord grew in Jerusalem, and many of the priests believe in Yeshua. And when I read that, I'm going, praise God, but does it mean that they had to stop doing the service now that they believe in Yeshua? It doesn't say they stopped. That was their job. Yes? So please know the difference, that to do the function of the holy work on the temple, then the requirement in the book of Leviticus, Numbers, and Exodus was never that they believe in Yeshua, because they all believe in the God of Israel. The corruption of the priesthood, the high priesthood, was the problem, not the service of the regular priests. Many of the regular priests did come to faith, because everyone who works in the temple knows that they were waiting for the Messiah. Okay? But sometimes when people tell me, no, if the priests of Israel, they start working, that sacrifice is not valid. How can you prove that? When Yeshua resurrected, they were doing sacrifices. 25 years later, Paul took and Nazareth vows, included 3 sacrifices in the temple. He was getting ready to do it when he got arrested. So I do not understand it. That's why I started the whole weekend with showing you how God defeated death, and how, in the Bible proved it, that the Bible, the Torah, cannot justify you by the sacrifices in the temple. Because the sacrifices in the temple could not take away death. It could restore your relationship with God, because your sins defile the temple. Is this making sense? Are you with me? Yes? Are you confused? Did I confuse you? Good. I got you. Don't believe me, go back and look it up. But have you looked into temple much? A little bit, so you see. Don't. No, that's the thing. When it comes to the temple, sometimes we need to allow ourselves to empty the cup, because it's a new area we never looked into. So what I recommend is you hear it, take notes, validate it, but right now it tells us that God spoke to Ezekiel, says, this is the law of the temple. You shall learn then this, then this, and this, right? So God is sovereign. He's the king. So therefore now, do we want people to all believe in Yeshua? Absolutely. Most definitely they all will when Messiah returns. Trust me. When Messiah returns, everyone in the temple will know that's the Messiah. Amen. They will know for sure. Okay, so if we're thinking about how everything works today, we're going to be here all day long, and I'll miss my flight. But I'm going to show you, instead of thinking about the overall thing, I'm going to start with one. Because that one event is going to trigger the rest of them. The one event is going to trigger everything else. It will be a moot point to talk about the sacrifices on the altar if we don't have the red heifer. It's irrelevant. If we don't take the Temple Mount, it's irrelevant. You can have the red heifer. If you don't have the Temple Mount on the Mount of Olives, it's irrelevant. It's a moot point. We can be arguing and debating about something that can never take place unless we take the Temple Mount. Keep reading that, please. So I'm glad you're here. Don't believe what I say. Go look it up.
It was like the appearance of the vision which I saw, like the vision which I saw when I came to destroy the city. The visions were like the vision which I
43?
saw. Yep, 43.
Okay, keep going.
Which I saw by the river Chebar.
Go to this right here.
Number 6.
Yeah.
Then I heard him speaking to me from the temple, while a man stood beside me. And he said to me, Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet.
This is the place of my throne, the place of the soles of my feet. That's what he rules from. You mean to tell me that God's desire to restore his temple is actually of the devil when God himself said it's the place of his throne on the earth? People try to disregard the book of Ezekiel because they don't understand the temple service. That's the next thing. Oh, we don't understand the temple. So Ezekiel, that's out of context. That's not going to happen. That's the level of scholarship we're dealing with now. They don't understand something, let's get rid of it. It doesn't exist. And let's justify the reason that it's not valid. Well, we have a problem. We have 5 red heifers that were brought to Israel back in late August, somewhere in September. We have a new issue to deal with. Are we equipped to handle it? Clearly not, because all the comments on Facebook prove that. So now we got all this, as if we needed more arguments. Right? So let's look into what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the steps. Aren't we ashamed of our are we shameful? Aren't we ashamed, O house of Israel? Isn't that what he said? Isn't that what I taught this morning? Yes? And what's the next thing that God says? If you're ashamed of your abominations, do what? Learn the temple. I didn't do this to set you up on purpose, because I wasn't even thinking about those verses. But I've been teaching about how God loves you enough to remove death so that you can present yourself in the realm of life. Well, how in the world do you know how to present yourself in the temple that is the realm of life, and that's where God dwells on the earth? The fact is that Yeshua will reign on earth and the temple will be restored. And by the way, newsflash, chapter 44, 45, 46 talks about offerings and sacrifices taking place in the millennial reign. You're going to have to get over it. It's going to happen. Instead of criticizing it, why don't you recognize what Yeshua did? Because Yeshua's offering and Yeshua's work had nothing to do with the temple services inside. Because the Torah proved it this weekend. That whatever the Torah of Moses could not justify you, the death and resurrection of Yeshua did. To remove death. That was not the answer for the Torah. Is that making sense? All right? Stay with me. Stay with me. You and me today, okay? This is cool. She's here. That's great. I mean, look. I so appreciate when people come and they never really heard me teach about this stuff. And it sounds kind of jumbled up, all kinds of crazy stuff. And you're willing to give me the opportunity. I respect that. Give me the opportunity to share. Just don't be quick to reject. Just meditate on it. You know? So death is defeated by the resurrection of Yeshua, right? So that means that we're going back to the mountain, we're going back to the garden, correct? So the temple is a microcosm of what the garden looked like and what Eden looks like. Would you all agree that God is trying to get us back to Eden? Okay, so what are the rules of holiness in Eden? How do you conduct yourself in the presence of the king? I mean, if you study what happened to Queen of England, you know there's a huge protocol you have to learn if you're going to meet the Queen of England. How much more the king now, King Charles? Right? So I want you to watch in May when he's enthroned. Please watch that. You're going to really see an amazing protocol about how to honor some dude who don't care about the kingdom. He really has no power anyway. He's a figurehead. And they're going to go through a huge enthronement ceremony legally so he can become king, because after all, he owns all the land. That's the reason why they still pay him. Legally, he owns all of England and all that stuff. Okay? How much more Messiah when he comes and he will be enthroned on the earth? Do you know the protocol? You know what to do? You know how to show up? Are you going to show up empty hands in the temple? The reason why we bring offerings is because it's a tribute to a king. It's a tribute to God when you bring your first fruits and your animal sacrifices. But it was a full source for the priests and the Levites doing the work so that you can come and be ministered by God. Think about that. Do we take care of the leaders the way it's supposed to be? You notice I haven't been pushing money the whole weekend. But have I asked you for an offering? Why? That's not my job. My job is to minister to you, lead you into the righteousness of Torah, teach you, and that's my job. God is supposed to now do the rest, to move your heart to provide for the need. That's it. That don't determine that. As hard as it is for me to deal with that, I have to believe my king. He'll move the heart of the people to do what is right. And whatever God provides, that's what I needed that weekend, and I go on. And I have to believe that. The last 10 years, I have to come full circle and really believe in God, that if I'm called by him, I need to be happy with whatever he provides at any given moment. And that's difficult. Because if I focus on the money, I'm going to change the message to please you. To appease you and to please you and to gain favor from you. And that's not my job. My job is to direct you to my king so that you honor him. That's it. I'm just a conduit. And just like you are, my job is not trying to convince you either. I'm just trying to share so we can walk together. Does that make sense? And it took me forever to realize that. Once I understood it, you know how much pressure that took off my back? Because it's like, oh, I wonder how many people are going to be there. Oh, man, I wonder. Who cares? Just do your job, Rico. You know? And I had to grow up to that point. I'm still learning. Okay? When I go to Latin America, I pay my own way. People don't know that. In many places in Latin America, I pay my airfare, my wife, I pay my hotel, my food. Because they don't have the resources. And that's perfectly fine. And you know the Lord always finds a way to supply the need. He's faithful. So what I want to do, I want you to know about the beauty of the house of my king. And right now, I'm going to teach you that through a covenantal relationship, God is looking to make us again his sacred space. He is looking for his people to return to the garden. So the teaching about the red heifer is not so much about an animal dying. It's more about the purpose of that, what that animal represents, and on the steps that will follow suit after the animal is presented. And how is done correctly, because the whole world will come undone once these things begin to happen. So this is not about, that's the temple of the Antichrist. No. It's about, oh, we have the red heifer. Oh, snap. We got 5. What's the next step? What are we looking for next? We need to have the piece of land in the Mount of Olives, because that's, according to the Torah, it's got to be east of the temple. Oh, okay, that's the Mount of Olives. So, wait a minute, who dominates that piece of land? The Palestinians. And then, but we need the Temple Mount, because the Temple Mount needs to be purified of corpse impurity, and the altar must be built. It can only be built if the red heifer ashes are there. So wait a minute, so the Antichrist cannot appear unless there is, the false Messiah. My teacher corrected me, so I want to start correcting it. The false Messiah appears is when the altar is defiled, right? But the altar cannot be built unless the red heifer comes around. The red heifer cannot be slaughtered until the Temple Mount is taken back. So therefore, I don't have to freak out anytime somebody tells you about fake prophecies. Because there are biblical, legal steps that must happen in order for the anti or the false Messiah to appear. And once the false Messiah appears, hallelujah, because then we have a declaration of war, and we have 1,000-something days until Messiah returns. Now, the world will not know. The world will not know how much time we got left, but we do. If we learn the temple language to understand prophetic views. Instead of attacking things, let's take a second look at it. I'm going to make a statement. It's probably going to be maybe the most controversial statement I'm going to make. And it's not a judgment on any leader, but I'm puzzled how leadership as a whole are not interested at all in the temple. It puzzles me. You cannot cover 1 Torah portion without covering a commandment of the temple. I don't understand. In Kedoshim, there's over 63 commandments. In last week's Torah portion, there was 20. I mean, last week's Torah portion had to do with Passover. How many laws of Passover? Did they teach us the laws of Passover in the Torah portion? Or only the fact that we were redeemed and Jesus is there? We already redeemed. Let's talk about how we recognize what a true Passover is versus not. What is your requirement and what is your commitment to the Passover Seder? How do you do the Passover Seder? Which is a commandment of Exodus 13:8. It's the same thing recycled every year. You know, so hopefully I'm able to encourage somebody to look beyond that and keep adding to the layers of understanding. That's all it is. Red heifer. This cute, nice little animal right there is probably the most confusing ritual ever done in Israel other than the scapegoat. Okay? And I don't have time to explain to you about that right now, so we're going to keep going. From garden to garden, death is the reason for the separation between God and humanity. The curse of the law is death and not the Torah. So when somebody says that the temple will not return, that we are a temple now, but we are the temple of God. Really? Let me ask you this. Is Corinth, Paul, talking to the individual or the community as a whole in 1 Corinthians? Then how come we apply it to the individual? Okay, so let me ask you another question. Are you all a temple individually? So tell me about the laws of the temple that keeps you holy. And how do you apply them today? Come on now, you're telling me you're a temple, you need to explain yourself. Oh, but the Holy Spirit is in my life, and I'm a temple of God, but I'm going to be eating my ham sandwich tomorrow. That's a contradiction. God would never put a pig on his altar. Now he expects it to have on you. Does that make sense? So we can talk about holiness. So I'm a temple, but I have no idea what holiness is. I'm a temple, but I don't know the protocol of how to approach God. We don't really even know what worship really is. We assume worship is a slow song that we sing for 20 minutes until the first person cries. I'm telling you, in some circles, they manipulate the music and they drag it for hours until somebody shows up crying and then the Spirit of God fell. I'm sorry, that's manipulation using music. That's what the world does. We should not be doing that. The expression, your worship is your everyday life. When you show up to the congregation, you rejoice and you thank God and you go slow songs. You want to meditate in the relationship. All those things are needed. They were done in the temple. They're needed, of course. You need to have that. Music attracts everybody. But music can also be a manipulative tool for people. So we need to know the differences. Okay? And I appreciate music. But how do we apply it? That's the question. Okay? Adam in the garden, eternal life, versus humanity outside the garden, the realm of death. We talked about that all weekend. The temple is the microcosm of God's garden, where the presence of God dwells and death does not have dominion. That's, when I understood it from that perspective, a lot of things change. Is God teaching me how he functions in his perfection. Okay? A quick example. You go from the court of the women to the court of Israel, and there are 15 steps. How many psalms, which are the psalms that are read that were sung in the temple on those 15 steps? Let me repeat that again. Let me take you there real quick. Hold on. So I'm turning around. I'm actually right there. Okay? There are 15 steps right here. This is the court of the women, right in front of the Nicanor gate. The Levites will stand right on those steps, and they will sing songs. Which ones are they? That's for the first day of the week, and they used to do that's the Hallel Psalms. They used to sing those during the high holidays. But over here, you have right. But over here, they used to, and you're right, because it was the first day of the week. 24 is first day of the week psalm in the court of the priests and the Dukan, where the Levites were. But here, they used to sing the Psalms of Ascent. Psalm 120 to 134. What is it again? ¿Quién subirá al monte? I forgot in English. Who shall ascend the mountain of the Lord? Those with clean hands, clean heart. Those who are actions of righteousness, and the heart is not idolaters. You know, that's why we actually wash our hands in Shabbat, based on that psalm. Because we're going to sit at the table of the Lord, and we want to make sure that we are now not committing idolatry, and our hands are clean to sit at the king's table. It comes from temple protocol. Yes. 120 to 134, Psalms of Ascent. Now, you see the steps of the steps dimensions? The height is a particular height. But then, this is not part of the teaching, this is the extra. When you go into the court of Israel, when you go into the court of Israel, and you're in the court of the priest right here, you see these 12 steps? They're big, right? The dimensions are different. They're bigger. Why? It's a 6 handbreadth instead of 5. And we're thinking, why is the difference on the dimensions? Because you go from one realm of holiness to the other. You're making aliyah, you're going up. But more so, it's telling you that the closer you get to the presence of God, the lonelier it is, and the higher of a commitment it is to get closer to God. All that from the dimensions of the temple. It's not just measurements. Remember, we were told it's entrances, it's exits, it's measurements, everything, because God is teaching you how to approach Him. Everything was a teaching. Everything was a teaching. Okay? That, by the way, that piece of information was what turned me around in temple attitude with my teacher in Jerusalem 6 years ago. He decided to start talking about the dimensions of the temple at 10:30 at night after we've been outside all day long since 7:30 studying the temple. My teacher goes on forever. 10:30 at night, he starts talking about the cubits and the differences of the cubits and the measurements. I'm going, are you kidding me? I've been up since 6. And immediately he says something that changed me. He goes, well, we don't really know why there's one dimension here and the other one there, but there's 5 handbreadth here and 6 handbreadth over there. And I go, whoa, time out. Stop the presses. You mean to tell me that God has designed it? I got it. God designed that for you to get close to Him, you have to have a higher level of commitment. He goes, yes. And that's when I just drop everything and I began to weep and I say, I get it. I understand it. Now I knew why He took me to Jerusalem to learn the dimensions, the archaeology, all that stuff, because He wanted me to get close. And all I'm trying to do is teach you how to get close with me. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to teach you how to get close with me. You know, that's all I want to do. Okay, that's our motivation. So, the whole city of Jerusalem is supposed to be holy and cleansed from corpse impurity. Repeat with me. Corpse impurity. That's the essence of what the Red Heifer offering is about. To cleanse something that has any connection with dead people. That's why a woman in her menstrual cycle could not go. That's why a leper could not go into the temple. That's why anyone who touched a dead person could not go. The reason was because He wants to teach us that His temple is the realm of life and no connection with the dead can come in. But He understood that we live in a fallen world. So if you had a seminal discharge, you are unclean until evening. You wash your garments and come back in. If you have a menstrual cycle, God created you with that function. Just stay away 7 days and then come in. If you're a leper, you're out of luck. But if you heal of leprosy, then you have a ritual of purification in which you stay around certain days, and then you can come in, and you are restored with full honors. Let me show you about that. Let me tell you a little bit about that. How is it that the ritual on accepting a leper is exactly the same ritual that was done for the inauguration of the high priest? A leper doesn't mean that now he's going to be a high priest. Why does he have to go to the door of the Nicanor, and there the priest would put oil in his ear, thumb and big toe, and blood in his ear, big thumb and his toe, in front of everybody, after this guy was a leper? He was brought in, say that? Yes, from shame, from the realm of death, to what? To honor him and to let everybody know this guy from this moment on is a full right citizen of the kingdom. He has the right to come into my realm. He is no longer to be treated as a leper because God Himself vindicated him and sanctified him. Wait a minute. We all had, wait. We all had leprosy. We all died. But through the blood of Yeshua, now we can come in as full members of the household of God. Right? So we should be learning the temple to know how to conduct ourselves in God's sacred space. So we don't defile it with our emotions and defile it with our actions and with our interpretations. Everything in the temple represented life. So nothing connected with death could enter into God's sacred space. Touching a dead person, entering a house recently dead person, touching a person who touched a dead corpse, lepers, a woman in her menstrual cycle, or anything connected with the dead. There are different levels of impurity. There is a father of all impurities. There are different degrees. The Mishnah tells you about it. Oh, my Lord, if you only know what people say about me because I read the Mishnah. Oh, he's going into Judaism. Oh, he's Jewish. Because in the Mishnah, you read in Ezekiel where it says, write it down in their sight. You read that? You know that's the premise for the Sanhedrin Council, to write everything down in the Mishnah, right? That one verse in Ezekiel is the reason why they wrote down in the Mishnah all the rulings in relation to the laws of the Torah and the temple. I don't study the Gemara because it's just the opinions. I read them once in a while, but I'm not really interested in the opinions. Why? Because it comes from people outside Jerusalem in the Middle Ages, removed from the environment of the Torah in Israel. I could go to Israel. I'm going next week, and I'm going to be there doing research on the temple. I can see things that the Rambam never saw. I'm not smarter than the Rambam. I just got more resources available for me today. I can see the archaeology. I can see a lot of stuff that a lot of those rabbis in the Middle Ages did not have. If they would have had those resources like we have today, trust me, their comments will be a lot different. We have it. And what are we doing? We have all the resources. I got to pull people's teeth trying to get them to go to Israel. They will invest in anything but the land of Israel. And I'm not trying to convince you here to go with me. Go with anybody who goes to the land. I just want you to see the beauty of the land. I want you to taste the beauty of the fruit that God provides. You know, I don't understand. We go on vacations all over the world, and let's go to Israel. Oh, it's dangerous. There are communities near Orlando I don't even dare go to at midnight. But yet I walk around Jerusalem like nothing. But it's dangerous. Yeah, it happens once in a while, but I'm in the land of my king. If he invited me, then I'll be okay. You know, I mean, one of those things. So anything connected with death is not allowed in the temple. Okay? So the Mishnah talks about the age of the red heifer. Rabbi Eliezer says the heifer is no more than 1 year old and the cow no more than 2 years old. So there's an age group. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's like 3 to 5 years, and it must have all of the hairs red. I don't know why. God just says so. It's a chukim. We do. You don't have to understand it. Remember when you have the kids? But why? Dad, but why? And when they got frustrated, right? You got frustrated. Because I said so. Chukah is the same way. God gives a decree, just do it because I'm the king and you just do what I tell you. You know, these things meant a lot to all the people back then. If you understand ancient Near Eastern perspective of temples, did you know that the blood on the doorpost was nothing new in the time of the Egyptians? Did you know to this day the Bedouins, if they're moving, they have rituals for the spring because they believe they were being attacked by demons. So what they would do an offering of their animals by the gate of their tent and put blood on the doorpost to protect them from demons. God is saying, no. You're going to take the power of Egypt, which was the goat or a lamb. You go to the Karnak. Look for the temple in Karnak, and you're going to see a street with images of statues of a lion with the head of a goat, because that represented the power of the Pharaoh. And God is saying, Israel, I want you to take the power of the Pharaoh, the oppressor, and slaughter it right on your doorpost, and put the blood on the doorpost, and then have a meal inside, and I will protect you, not the demons. I'm the one who protects you from death. I'm the one who will keep you from the destroyer. And if you read Exodus 11 and 12, you're going to notice that the destroyer came about, and the Lord jumped over. He leaped over. He protected them. Huh? Exactly, it's the blood. It's not the death of the animal. It's a covenantal blood. That blood is guaranteed that God will protect us from death. The whole ritual is about protecting us from death. That's why Yeshua says, when you do this in remembrance of me. You have the first redemption from death out of Egypt. Now I'm going to redeem you from death in the future for all of eternity. Hello? The message is right there. But we never study ancient Near Eastern culture. So we don't see the contrast. And all we do is argue about Passover instead of understanding the motivation and the reasons for Passover. Yes? You serious? What happened? You serious all of a sudden? What happened? You okay? Okay, you are? Because I'm thinking, you guys ate. You're probably thinking about a nap right now. All right, so these are the steps. Well, let's talk about the prophetic requirements. By the way, I want to let you know that I'm having a great time this weekend. Thank you so much. I am passionate. I love the Lord. I love you. I want to give you my best. And I hope and I pray I do not come off in any way arrogant. That's not my intent. If I do, please forgive me, because that's not my intent. But I'm not going to be ashamed of the gospel. I'm not going to be ashamed of Messiah. And I'm not going to be ashamed of understanding certain things of the temple, because God is good. You see, I want to share with you. Okay? All right. So, prophetic requirements for the second coming of Messiah. Now, again, this is my teaching right now, and if I'm wrong on something, I will fix it. But I'm going to show you what I know today. Right? These are the steps. Red Heifer, 3 to 5 years. And we have 5 candidates right now. When I did this teaching, they were 18 months old. They're probably like 22, 23 months old now. By the way, I got to meet the gentleman who raised them in Texas. We're going to do a conference in North Carolina. We're doing a conference to talk about this. I got to talk to the gentleman who brought them over to Israel. And I got to work with the 2 leading rabbis. Joe and I were working with the 2 rabbis that those 2 guys asked to promoting the understanding of the Red Heifer in Israel and around the world. So I've got to tell you, I don't mean this in arrogance, you are actually looking at one of the resources who have direct contacts with the guy who raised them, the guy who brought them, and the 2 rabbis who are actually presenting the information. Amen. And we are believers in Yeshua. So with that being said, if you have a question about the Red Heifer, consider asking me and Joe. Yes, sir? More or less. Almost, yes. I'm going to find out more. Actually, that's one of the questions I have when I go. But remember, if the 3rd year comes around and the Temple Mount is not taken, we just got to wait. But the whole thing is between 3 and 5. 3 and 5. So we still have a window. So why is the age important? Because if we have the age right now, I'm sorry? Repeat that again? Yeah, 2 or 3, yes. It disqualifies them, absolutely. So what we need to understand is this, with the points that they're making is very valid, is that if there are 22 months, that's what, a year and what? Almost 2 years? My math is terrible, okay? Okay? When it gets to the 3rd, if the Temple Mount is not taken, should we worry about the Red Heifer? No. So it means that we have windows. So we got one sign. So we got to think as signs. Oh, what are the signs of the end? Well, to restore the temple and the altar, you cannot build the temple building unless you have the Red Heifer. And you cannot build the temple building unless the altar goes up first. You cannot do any sacrifices unless the Red Heifer's here, the Temple Mount is taken, they measure the area, they put the altar, you have to have a priest, you have to have a Sanhedrin, you have to have offerings. So you cannot freak out when something happens in Jerusalem. You follow the steps. So therefore, when people start saying, prophecy, the end of the world next to Sukkot, you say, excuse me, we have not followed the legal requirements for these things to take place. Now you are sober, and you're not just walking around blind, believing anybody who tells you it's the end of the world. While everyone is freaking out, you know where you're at, and you're looking for signs instead of freaking out for anything that appears to be one. That's the reason why we do this, okay? So, 1, the Red Heifer, the age requirement. 2, ashes for court's impurity, Leviticus 15, verse 15 and 16, because the sins of Israel defiles the temple. Therefore, you know how many people are buried on the Temple Mount? Did you know that there are kings of Jordan buried there? Many people don't know that. In the extended wall, where people think is the wall of the temple, where the Cortes is, where the western wall is, that's a retaining wall. That wall was not there during the time of the Roman, of the Hasmonean period or the First Temple period. That was added by Herod as an extension. That's permissible in the Torah. He basically added, and by the way, no one can add a wall to the temple or the city unless it was approved by the Sanhedrin Council. And anything that was added to the city and the temple needed to be sanctified. Do you know the ritual that they did in order to sanctify the city when they have to expand the walls because of population explosion? I mean, all this stuff is important, guys. Because if we're going to talk about prophecy, and by the way, I'm going to make a statement here. If anyone starts talking about prophecy on the temple and they have no knowledge of the temple, I highly suggest you find somebody who does the temple. Because I think they're going to give you an unfair assessment. They may be speaking a lot of things that are right, but eventually they'll be limited because they're not understanding all the mechanism of holiness of the temple. It takes a while. I'm still learning them. 4, you got to clean the area first. Okay, let's focus on that 3. If they take the Temple Mount right now, how long do you think it will take them before they can cleanse the whole mountain? What makes the mountain defiled right now? 1. What else? Yeah, 2. Dome of the Rock, that's 2. What's the 3rd one? The obvious one. Trees. Thank you. Who said that? Oh, you study with Joe. You know this. The trees. Trees are not allowed on the Temple Mount. So you need to raise everything down, take down the Dome of the Rock. You have to take out all the stuff there, and then you have to put the ashes of purification. Do we have the waters of purification now? We got the waters. We don't have the ashes. We got the Gihon, and we have the pool of Shiloach that just so happened was discovered in 2004. In November, I did a tour on Israel in English, and the guy who discovered the pool of Shiloach was the guy giving us the tour. Okay? And he showed us right above the Gihon, when he made the discovery, he says, we believe that this was a temple during the time of the Jebusites in the city of David. It was not the temple of Jerusalem of the time of David, but it was a temple before the Israelites got there, the Jebusites. He called it the Melchizedek temple. There are people going around saying that the temple was in the city of David above the Gihon. You don't know the temple. Because the Gihon was never the source of water for the temple, ever. Okay? This is research. This is not my assumption. So when people say, well, the Gihon was the source of the water, there was no more water. Well, have you heard of the serpent's pool? Have you heard of Zachariah's pool? I think it's called. Zedekiah's, I can't remember. Have you heard of the Mamila pool? I can take you to them when we go to Jerusalem. Have you heard of Solomon's pools in Bethlehem? Can provide up to 60 million gallons of water. All right, here we go. So then, once you clean the area, you measure the area of the altar. And by the way, it has to be built in the exact same location as the one that was prior there. So how do you know where it is? You got to know where that altar is. So you got to know the dimensions of the temple. You got to know where the buildings were. Well, how do you know where the buildings were? If you know where the water sources are, if you know where all the 26 cisterns were, then you know that every building needs electricity and water and a bathroom, correct? There were bathrooms on the Temple Mount. There were buildings. Once you locate the cisterns, then you know where the buildings were. Once you know where the buildings were, you want to know the right measurements. Once you know the right measurements, you know exactly where the altar was. Okay? It's a lot of work. There was a cistern in Beit Hanitzot, 2 cisterns. There was one in Beit Beit Aptinas. There was one that you need to know, number 27, according to the Kamrashik model, in which it was called the leper's mikveh. Right under the leper's chamber in the court of the women, underneath is cistern 27, still there to this day. Now, why is that relevant to me? Because Yeshua told the leper, go to the temple and present yourselves as the Torah says. So you have a leper coming from Samaria, or the north. They're coming to the temple. The Jews and the Samaritans hated each other. Samaritans, they did not respect Jerusalem as the place of authority and honor of God. And the Jews hated the Samaritans because they were a mixture race. And Yeshua is telling the leper, go to present yourself to the temple and do what Torah says, the law of Moses says. Can you imagine this guy is a leper, and everybody knew he was a leper. Now he has to go to the temple and go to the rite of purification and he has to go into the mikveh in one of the rooms that hardly was ever used. And there was a belief that when Messiah will come, the lepers will be healed. By the way, the whole miracle of the leper again with the Samaritan was about reconciliation of the whole house of Israel, recognizing each other's authority. Does that make sense now? The two sticks coming together. Next, the dedication of the altar takes how many days? 8 days. That's why we have 8 days of Hanukkah. Well, how come we have the menorah? It says 7 in the Bible. It says 7 in the Bible. Why do they have 9? Because they're not supposed to use the holy things for something else. So they are commemorating the 8 days that it took to dedicate the altar, and it's 9 because one of them likes the others. No one is trying to take away the menorah. It's not the legend of the oil, it's the dedication of the altar. You mean to tell me that you oppose the dedication of God's authority and throne on the earth? Let me repeat that again. When we attack Hanukkah, I say, oh, it's not in the Bible. Well, in the book of Haggai, God told them to build the temple. Isn't that valid? So the Maccabees, they want to restore the temple, the honor of the temple, and the shame that the Greeks gave it, remove that shame, and dedicate the altar and offer sacrifice again for God. You object to God being restored as the sole authority? Because it's too Jewish? Is it really the altar or the dedication, or is it the fact that even Jewish people today don't even know, half of them don't even know it was the altar about dedication? They think it's about the oil that happened. Many of the secular Jews don't even know. Secular people in America ask them, what is Hanukkah about? Well, we think it's about the dedication of the temple, but it's more about the legend of the oil. We are misinformed, both sides. The more time flies, the more misinformation and disinformation. I'm getting sick of those two terms. Misinformation and disinformation. I don't even know what they mean. That's all they say in the media. Number 6, you start the Tamid offering. You got to start the Tamid offering. It's a commandment. Please go to Numbers chapter 28, verse 5 or 6. You read it yesterday. Is this making sense? So the first step is getting a red heifer. They got 5. Right now, they're 18 to 22, 23 months. They're getting to that threshold of 3 years to 5 years. 2, they got to have the ashes. How do you get the ashes? First, you got to find a place on the Mount of Olives. Numbers 19 tells you exactly where to slaughter. It's not a sacrifice. It's a slaughter. Well, it just so happened that, who's been to Israel here? Okay. You go to the Mount of Olives? Okay, you know when you have the lookout, when you look towards the city and you see the wall, the eastern wall, and that nice little lookout, and there's a church right behind you. Right next to it, there's an empty spot, empty lot. You know who purchased that piece of lot? The people who brought the land, the red heifers to Israel. So now we have the red heifers, and we have the piece of land on the Mount of Olives. No, many people don't know that. Okay? And there's no buildings there. It's wide open. And the rabbis know that's the place. I could take you and tell you that's the place where they used to slaughter the red heifer. So now we have 2 elements. We got the red heifers, and we got the location. But can they do anything right now? No, because the Temple Mount is not taken. Okay, go ahead.
1 through 9?
No, just read verse 4 or 5.
4 and 5. The one lamb you shall offer in the morning, the other lamb you shall offer in the evening, and 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with 1/4 of a hin of pressed oil.
Keep going.
It is a regular burnt offering which was ordained at Mount Sinai for a sweet aroma.
It was what?
A regular burnt offering which was ordained at Mount
It was
Sinai.
what?
Ordained.
Ordained. Who ordained it? So if the temple's restored, don't they have to do what God said? So how can you call that of the devil? How can we call that? Does that eliminate what Yeshua did for us? Then why do we mix one or the other? This is worship. God says, as long as the temple stands, morning and evening offering. It's a communal. It's for your well-being. Let's continue. Next. Then, once we have the start of the offering, you cannot do that unless you have a priesthood, a Sanhedrin. the offerings. The Jubilee can be declared only in the temple with the Sanhedrin, an altar, and sacrifices. And the second coming of Messiah talks about the language of the temple. The sound of the great trump. That's actually Yom Kippur. Because on Yom Kippur is when they declared the Jubilee. Do you all believe Yeshua's coming on the Jubilee? Well, how can that be? We don't know how to declare it because there's no temple. There's no altar. It has to be on Yom Kippur. So you need a Yom Kippur in order for the Jubilee to be declared on the earth. And you have to sound the great sound of the trumpet. These are biblical laws, guys. I'm not making this stuff up. I recently heard one guy saying, oh, it was declared in tabernacles that the Jubilee has begun. And I'm going like, what? So I went to Jerusalem because I was there. And I met with a leading temple authority right now because the older one is sick. And I asked him, Rabbi, did anyone declare the Jubilee right now? He looked at me and I knew. I said, I already know the answer, but please tell me. He goes, whoever said that doesn't know the Bible. Because we cannot do any of that stuff unless there's a temple, offerings, and Sanhedrin. That makes me orthodox because I'm repeating the same thing the Bible says that the rabbi agrees with. You see what I mean? It's like, so we need to follow the law. He's a lawyer, he can tell you. You got to follow the law. There are procedures that you have to follow in order to establish a case. How can the Antichrist defile something that is already defiled? How can the Antichrist defile something? If that's the Antichrist or the false Messiah, then how can he defile the thing that's already defiled? Right? Double profaning. Is this making sense, guys? All right, next. You need the importance of Mount of Olives in Zechariah. So why is the red heifer needed? What are the red heifer ashes needed for? Can Yeshua, oh, this is a good one. Can Yeshua legally return without the red heifer? I guarantee you, you never asked yourself that question. Something to think about. But wait a minute, he's Messiah. He can do whatever he wants. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father until the Bible says that he takes direction from the Father. Right? So therefore, the Father would determine when, go get him. That's how it works. That's legal authority in the Bible. So what? It says, what is the temple of God, of the false Messiah? What is the daily offering? Let me ask you guys a question. Please don't take it offensive. If you don't know, it's okay. Just raise your hand. We will not stone you. We are learning. How many of you have never studied the daily offerings and how they took place in the temple? Never studied it, right? Tamid, the protocol, and how they did it. Consider looking into a tractate in the Mishnah called Tamid. Tamid, T-A-M-I-D. And it teaches you exactly how they did from the moment they got up to the moment they went to sleep. Okay? Now, what's peculiar about that is that it was written by Eliezer ben Yaakov. Eliezer ben Yaakov was a priest who lived in the first century. That makes it a primary source. Eliminating Yomah, Tamid, and Midot, you are eliminating someone who saw it. So if you don't want to read the Mishnah because it's Jewish, and you refuse to read it from a primary source, then don't read Josephus either. Or the letter of Aristeas. And by the way, did you ever meet Luke? Did you know Luke? Did you ever meet Paul? Did you know Peter? Did you ever meet any of those guys? Then why are we reading their letters and we are so adamant about what they said, but we don't even know? Because they were primary source. We are relating the story that they saw. So we believe their witness. Get it? So therefore we validate it and we believe that as divinely inspired because it was given through the Spirit of God. Correct? So when you read these resources, you're doing it because you want to understand what was going on at the time of the first century history, what we see in the Bible as the events of Yeshua. If not, we're not going to get a full picture. All right? All right, next. Numbers 19. This is a decree of the law that Adonai has commanded. Go ahead and read for me, brother.
Saying, speak to the Israelites and let them take you with a red heifer without physical defect.
Oh,
on which
no, read the
yoke-
first part.
Oh, This is the decree of the law that Adonai has commanded, saying, Speak to the Israelites, and let them take you a red heifer without a physical defect on which a yoke has not been placed.
So right now, people saying, no, that red heifer, that's of the Antichrist. I actually heard comments like that. Don't they know that God says it's a decree? You know that when a king makes a decree, no one can break a decree? You know when God says it's a chukim, chukah, right? Statute. Chukah is a custom regulation. It's a stipulation. It's an ordinance. You cannot change it. You got to do exactly what it says. So in order for the daily offerings to be official on the Temple Mounts, it requires the ashes of an animal that we don't know what it stands for. Just because God says so. So it's just so. Guys, did you realize the honor that you have in this world? That in your lifetime you got to see not one red heifer, 5. I'm going to have a chance to see them when I get to Israel. You know, so cool. Taking pictures. I got to see them. Now, whether or not they will use those is irrelevant. But I got to live in a time frame that quite possibly be the time that Messiah can come. Wow. And people freaking out. You will think that this will be such a celebration. Wow, guys, things are happening faster than we think. Let's rally together. Let's learn about what will happen next. Nope. They call it anti-Messiah. It's not coming from Christians. It's coming from people among us. That's crazy. So, it is what it is. So, and you will give it to Eleazar the priest, and it will be brought out to the place outside the camp, and it will be slaughtered in his presence. In his presence is an idiom for east of the camp, right here, on this location. This is west, north, south, east. So the Mount of Olives is immediately east of where the temple was. That's why it has to be east. It cannot be in the north. It cannot be in the south. If they do it in the south, it's actually, the head have to be pointing south and looking west, if I remember correctly. Please, make sure you're right. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. The face of the red heifer needed to be looking west. If it's looking east, it's disqualified. The priest has to be standing in a particular way. None of the animal can be in the temple. Now the hide, the meat, the blood. It was sprinkled from the Mount of Olives towards the temple. That's what represents Yeshua. That God's sacred space was sanctified outside the camp. You see? Okay, so therefore now, we know now the Mount of Olives is the place, biblically. There are different fires. So which one is the one that the Antichrist is going to defile? There were three fire pits on the temple, on the altar. The one in the middle is called the tapuach, is the ashes of all the fires. There was one over here, there was one there, and there. Which one is the one that will stop the moment the anti-Messiah, the false Messiah, will come in? By the way, it says he will sit in the temple as if he is God. Right? Where does he sit? The Holy of Holies? No. No one can sit in the Holy of Holies where the king will sit. Do you know that Herod never sat there? Because Herod was not of the line of David. Herod built the royal stoa in the south part because he needed a place to sit. Although he's the king, he was never allowed to sit in the court of Israel. Only the king of Israel can sit in the court of Israel because God appointed him as his prince and as king to the people. Anyone else will sit there, it will be an affront to the authority of God. That's why no one can sit in the court of Israel, no one can sit in the court of the women, and no priest can sit as long as they did the service. They will have to go to the side buildings or outside the holiness to sit down, but not in the temple. You don't sit in the presence of the king. And this is why when you go to a Torah service, when they open the Torah and they open the ark, everyone will stand. And this is the reason why the Torah procession is going around. You follow the Torah because it's a representation of the living word and the king of Israel. We're not worshiping the scroll. We are rendering the proper protocol as if the king is among us. Right? And you know what's shameful? The Jewish people do it every Sabbath in their synagogue. and they don't believe in Yeshua. We believe Yeshua will be that king among us, and we don't learn the protocol because he's Jewish. I'm telling you, man, I have a lot of bones to pick. It's shameful. Did you know that the prayers in the Siddur, are actually structured according to the Tamid? You have the list in this particular Siddur. It teaches you. Right over here it tells you. It says, the service of the heart. Rabbi Shimon Schwab, 1995, the leader of the German Jewish community in Washington Heights for close to 40 years, suggests that the service of the heart corresponds to the service, to the Tamid, to the Avodah of the temple. Every Jewish person knows that. So when they do the service, so they go, number one, the court of the women. You do certain prayers because it's as if you're in the temple. They give you the whole thing in the temple. So when you do the prayers in the morning, you are getting closer each step. You hear, then you hear, then you hear, then you hear, then you there, then you there, then you hear. It's as if now we can come boldly, get it? To the prayers. And it teaches you the order of the royal language, how to approach God in each step. In each step. And then when you get to the presence of God, you're in the presence of the Lord, you say, Baruch atah Adonai. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe. Because you're in the presence of the King of glory. Now you can talk to him. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, God of our forefathers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The great and awesome God, supreme God, who bestows beneficial kindness and creates everything. Who brings a redeemer for the children for your name's sake with love. O King, helper, and shield. Blessed are you, O Lord, King, shield of Abraham. You are eternally mighty to resuscitate the dead, O Lord. And then you continue to go through the whole thing. You make petitions, and you ask questions. Give me a second, guys. And you go through the whole thing. And at the end, you say, Ose Shalom bin Roma. You remove yourself backwards, and you say, may there be peace in the highest. May there be peace upon Israel. And all we say, Amen. Why do we do that? Because we're removing ourselves from the world, from God, and then we're going back into the world. And you never turn your back to your king when you finish. It's a protocol of order and honor. So you go through what is called gratitude. And then you praise wonders of creation. And then you do accepting the Lord's authority and sovereignty as creator, giver of the Torah, the king, and the presence in the history. Then you have a private audience with him. My Father, my King, please consider this, this, and that. And then you do a final plea. Hashivenu atov v'toatecha. See? And then it says setting priorities of the day, and then your concluding statement, you finish. May the expressions of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart find favor before you, my God and my Redeemer. What is wrong with that language? Question? Yep. And it teaches you a blueprint. Now, what's it? Yeah, I have the bigger one too. So the whole idea is not to say, oh, I know the prayers, I'm holy. No, no, no. I know the blueprint of the prayer, so when you learn to pray, you find favor. Remember when I read Daniel? You notice the structure? You probably didn't notice the structure, how he opened the prayers. You go back and read Daniel again, you'll see it. Just like Nehemiah. Read Nehemiah in the first few verses of his prayer. He'll tell you that, you know why they pray like that? Because they serve kings. Nehemiah was the cupbearer of the king, and Daniel worked for about 3 kings. Moses, he used the same language too, because he was a prince. So we serve now the King of the universe, and when we talk to him, we don't have a language of honor towards that king. I didn't know how to use it, so I needed something that followed the blueprint of the temple, what to do in each step. Does that make sense? Yes. All right, now you know the motivation as to why I promote the temple. Next, these are the fires of the altar. Okay, this is the one that's Tamid. The moment the anti-Messiah comes, the false Messiah comes, he is going to profane it by sitting in an area he's not allowed. When he sits in that area, he is now usurping the authority that God gave the son of David. Thus, it's an affront to God's authority and kingship and throne, and then all hell breaks loose. No longer the sacrifices will be acceptable because a false king sat in an illicit manner. Is this making sense, guys? Okay, good. I get all excited. I keep going, so I want to make sure you're with me. Numbers 19, verse 11 and 13. Please continue, brother.
The one who touches a corpse of any person will be unclean for 7 days. He will purify himself on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day he will be clean. If he does not purify himself on the 3rd day, he will not be clean on the 7th day. Anyone who touches a corpse, the person of a human being who died, and does not purify himself, defiles the tabernacle of Adonai.
Okay, wait. Did Yeshua touch a dead girl? Yeah, he did. He resurrected her, right? So that means that he contracted corpse impurity. Did he sin morally or ritually? He didn't sin. He was taking care of a young little girl who died. That's life. Now you notice that Aaron was not allowed to mourn for his sons because he cannot rent his garment as a sign of mourning in the temple, because the temple is the realm of life. That's the reason. Not because God doesn't want Aaron to have emotions. It's just that where it happened, you're not allowed to do that because it represents life, not death. Okay? So what we have here is that God is saying, if you touch anything connected with death, you cannot come into my house because it's all about life. That's the most simple way we can understand this. Yeshua, he was willing to be ritually defiled to bring life. That's the premise. Yeshua was willing to be ritually defiled because he understood that then you go through a rite of passage that would allow you to come back and do what you need to do in the temple. Obviously, he went to the temple. So he didn't die because he didn't do anything wrong in regards to ritual purity. But he was always morally upright. He was a moral man. So today, Orthodox Judaism, they try to live according to ritual purity outside of the temple proper. That's why the ultra-Orthodox in New York, they can't have any connection with anybody. In Orlando, they cannot have any connection with anyone. Many places they go, they're all by themselves. They don't talk to you. They don't eat with you. They don't have fellowship with you. Why? Because we are all ritually unclean. That's why if you open the bottle of wine, they will not drink it. Because you are ritually unclean. And they are right. We are all ritually unclean. But we are now morally cleansed because Cornelius was ritually unclean, living in a ritually unclean pagan city, but he was keeping the commandments, praying to God and his family, and God observed this man saying, in the middle of a ritually corpse impure town like Caesarea by the sea, we have this centurion that if he gets caught, he's going to be crucified by the emperor, committing treason for worshiping the God of Israel instead of the emperor. And this man and his family are praying to the God of Israel, and they are doing good deeds, helping the people. God is saying, these are the people I need in my kingdom. Hey, Peter, go get them. I don't go to those places. They're ritually unclean. What do you think the sheet was about? Kill and eat. What? I would never clean anything common and unclean. And he showed them how many times? 3 times. He still didn't get it. I wonder what that is. And then you hear the knock on the door. Romans. Oh, we get it, pigs. He goes to Caesarea. He shows up. And do you realize by Peter just going to Caesarea, he could not go right to the temple? Just stepping one step in Caesarea by the sea, he was unclean for a whole bunch of days. He was ritually unclean. He had to go to the rite of passage, a mikveh. And if he touched anything dead, then he had to do that. Okay, is this making sense? I want to explain a little bit extra so we get it. I got an hour. Then I got to run. Okay? Okay, keep going, brother.
And that person will be cut off from Israel because the waters of impurity were not sprinkled on him. He will still be unclean, and uncleanness is on him.
So can the altar be built without the Temple Mount being sprinkled with the ashes and the waters? Some rabbis argue, by the way, that you can. I disagree. But anyway, so that means that you have to follow certain steps in order for the second coming of Messiah, right? There's a protocol. The way we used to think about it was at any moment. at any moment. At any moment. No, that's not how God works. It's a legal requirement, guys. The earth is under the sovereignty of Satan. And although God created it, the sovereignty, Adam gave it to Satan, to the enemy. So therefore, God wants to make sure that legally he has claims to his land, to the whole earth. That's what I don't understand. He's the creator, but he still goes to the proper protocol. Okay? So, watch this. Numbers 19, verse 14 and 18. Go ahead.
This is the law of a person who dies in a tent. Everyone who comes into the tent and all who are in the tent will be unclean 7 days.
Are we all ritually unclean?
Yep.
So what happens if the altar is built? Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to get in trouble here. Do you know where your tithe is going to go when you dedicate the altar? The temple. The tithe. It has to go to the temple. It's a law. When the altar is dedicated, no leaders can collect the tithe for themselves. Read Numbers 18. That's going to create chaos. And by the way, if you can go to Jerusalem, you have to go, and you got to bring a donation, and you got to bring an offering. Right? How is that going to be? That's interesting. Because the men are commanded to go, those who are Jewish, right? Israelites. They're going to see us come and say, what are you doing here? Get out. You know? But there's so many things that will change. By the way, you know the sound of the shofar? Do you know that in Jerusalem, no one will be able to do it once the altar is dedicated? Because only in the temple for certain announcements you do it. The silver trumpets, only in the temple. By the priest. Not even the Levites could do it. The Aaronic blessing can only be chanted by the priest. That's what the Torah says in number 6. Now, it's allowed to be said by the head of the family on Kabbalah Shabbat, the reception of Shabbat. You know, that's the only time. But to bless the community, as a whole community, it has to be a son of Aaron. It has to be a son of Aaron. That's what the Torah says. Number 6. Write it down. Number 6. Yeah, but they will not sing the Aaronic blessing. Number 6. Yeah. Huh? Huh? Who? Yeah, but the priests are Levites, but not the Levites are not priests. See, the Levites is a whole family, and the priest comes from Aaron, who are part of the Levite family. And only to the son. Go to number 6. What? Let's take her out. Stone right now. I'm just playing. I'm just playing with you. I'm just playing with you. Number 6. Verse 24, 25, I think. Isn't it crazy when you don't have your own Bible, you don't know where everything is? Yeah.
Which verses?
Yeah, verse 26, 24.
26?
Yeah, right here.
It is.
Right here.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, The Lord bless you.
Okay, we know the blessing.
Yep.
But it says, speak to Aaron, and these are the way you shall.
Yes.
That's going to be a controversial thing. Everything's controversial. Okay? He's not trying to take away your power or your desire to delight in him. He's just putting the kingdom in order. There's certain things certain people do. For example, the whole thing about sighting of the moon, you can look at the moon here in America, but when the altar is dedicated, it doesn't matter what you say. Right. It's what the Sanhedrin Council says when they see it and when they proclaim it. You know why? Because it includes sacrifices. Numbers chapter 28, verse 11. The moment it's connected with the altar, it falls out of the realm of us over here, and it falls back into the authority of the temple. Go ahead and read it. Yep. No, 28:11.
At the beginnings of your months you shall present a burnt offering to the Lord, 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs in their first year, without blemish. 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering, mixed with oil for each bull.
So it's connected with sacrifices. So you're going to see the new moon, and you're going to go like, we're going to wait into the Jerusalem temple. They say it's holy, but it's the wrong day. It doesn't matter, because Numbers 18 says that they bear the guilt of the priesthood. They bear the guilt of the tabernacle. If they mess up in their rulings, they bear the guilt. It's like the Supreme Court. When they have a ruling, They're the ones who carry the responsibility. We have the consequences. Now, people don't like to hear this because it brings order. It takes away chaos. Everyone does their own thing. Now, this is when the temple is built or when the altar is dedicated. So what if the red heifer is slaughtered tomorrow? Can they do it tomorrow right now? No. Why? Not old enough. That's one. They have to make sure it doesn't have the 3 hairs. That's 2. They don't have the Temple Mount. They've not been cleansed. Now you get it, you see? So what you're doing is this. Okay, guys, the news. Israel has just taken the Temple Mount. Oh, snap. This went into DEFCON 3. You're going to go like, yeah, Messiah's coming. Yeah, you know. You're going to go, okay, now DEFCON 1 is the red heifer appeared. DEFCON 2, there's a little war. Oh, we got the Temple Mount. How long will it take to clean all the trees, to do all that stuff? Cleanse. Trust me, it'll take less than a week. They're going to really go through it quickly, right? And then after that, they're going to go, okay, where are the priests? And they're going to be coming out of nowhere because they've been trained for almost 20 years, and you don't even know it. And then all of a sudden, now we got the waters of purification, the Gihon and the Shiloach. And just so happened that we have a particular pilgrimage road that they used to use in the time of the temple that has been recently discovered. I was able to walk through it halfway up. And they're digging it all the way to the southern steps of the temple. Hello? All the mechanism is happening today. And it's underground now. It's underground. So the moment they dig it and they start purifying it, then the priest can go underground all the way up if he wants to. Amazing stuff happening. And we are arguing about crazy stuff. And the whole world is hinging on certain events. Right? And then after that, you're going to have the altar now. And you're going to see the priest, purifying the place. And then you're going to start measuring. That's going to be the battle. It's like, where was the temple building? Where is it? Where was the temple building? We don't know where it was. Well, we know the temple was where the Dome of the Rock is because that's sacred space for the Muslims. That's what they do. And we know what the dimensions are. We know what the systems are. Well, not all the Jews know where it is. Only few of us around the world know, right, brother? Right, my sister? You've been studying with us for a while. I'm not going to tell you what I was going to tell you. So what happens now when they start rebuilding the temple and they put the first offering on it? Oh, Lord. So we got the red heifer. We got the Temple Mount. We got the Mount of Olives. We have the cleanse it. We have the water. We have the priest. We have the Sanhedrin. We have the offerings. We got the offerings and all hell breaks loose. I'm just waiting for the first knucklehead to think he's God. The moment I see him, then you start counting. Now we know exactly where we're at in the God's prophetic time. Instead of trying to speculate. They have, I guarantee you guys, there are more steps that I'm sure will become more relevant the more I keep going. These are the steps that I know today. So I'm not going to say, this is the way. No. These are some of the steps that you need legally for the Great Tribulation to begin. It's talking about a legal case. Guys, remember I told you about divine judgment? Remember I showed you that? There has to be an accusation, right? And there has to be divine judgment, correct? So how is God going to defend his honor when there's an accusation against his people and his house? And it concerns me greatly when people just speak so badly about the house of God, as if it's something so bad. It's very concerning to me. Keep going.
Every container that is opened that does not have a lid cord on it is unclean. Anyone in an open field who touches one who has been slain, or a corpse, or a bone of a person, or a burial site, he will be unclean for 7 days. For the unclean person they will take from the powder of the burnt purification offering, and they will put running water into a container. A clean person will take hyssop and dip it into the water and sprinkle it on the tent and on all the objects and persons who were there, and on one who touched the bone, or the slain, or the dead, or the burial site.
This is the procedure they have to go through when they dedicate the area. I'm reading it because I want you to know exactly what you need to see. So if they start doing this, they don't follow this procedure, then it's not legal. Do you understand how the Torah now becomes a blueprint of a legal way of doing things? If you ask my brother who's a lawyer, in order for him to establish a case, there has to be a protocol and a procedure. If you miss one of your procedures, they can throw the case out. Am I right or am I wrong? That's what happened in John chapter 8. In John chapter 8, they bring the adulterous woman. They bring the witnesses were the guys who saw her in the act. They were the leaders trying to get Yeshua in a pickle, right? They don't bring the adulterer, and the witnesses are the people who knew what she was, and they're trying to set him up. So Yeshua could not judge her. First of all, Yeshua was not part of the Sanhedrin Council. Second of all, there was, according to Leviticus 20:10, they did not bring the adulterer and the adulteress and the witnesses that Deuteronomy chapter, I think, 17 talks about. By the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, any matters established. So according to the law, did Yeshua, not having the proper procedure of law, could he render a judgment on something like that? The case was thrown out. He knew he could not judge her, although she was guilty, because the law establishes that you have to bring the adulterer. If he would have judged her, he would have disqualified himself as a Messiah. But he told her, sin no more. Oh, you're so lucky right now that I didn't bring the adulterer girl. Sin no more. No, I got it. Listen, I wasn't there. I don't know. But when people read the story, they paint Yeshua saying, sing no more. No, I believe Yeshua got on her face. Don't you dare sing anymore. Don't sin anymore. This is my Father's commandment. You understand? It says, shame on you. Because he came to restore the honor of the Father. You don't get that when you read the text. But if you understand the law, he would have told her. Can you imagine in the kingdom? They see us walking around, and the king comes in, and we all stand and turn to him, and then all of a sudden the king sees you, and he comes to you in the middle of everybody. Let me remind you who's going to be there. Adam, Moses. You may be standing next to Solomon or Jeremiah, one of the two. Okay? Isaiah, Hosea, all these people. And the Messiah sees you from afar, Anthony. He starts coming towards you. In the middle of the great Hall of Fame guys, comes to the guy that no one knows. He says, Anthony, thank you for being a servant. Thank you for your heart doing the liturgy for my Father. But then he sees somebody else, and immediately, when you do something wrong, and you're at work or somewhere, or your mom look at you and you go, like that, they give you that look. Can you imagine Yeshua coming to you in the kingdom and approaches you, and you're so excited because the king is in the midst, he's there, he's going to talk to you, he says, did I ever tell you to change my Father's feast? Did I ever tell you to oppress your brother? Did I ever tell you to change the commandments? Did I do that? Which one do you want to be? I decided to be that one. I said, I'd rather be that one. I want to honor my master. I want to make sure that I find favor. So in doing so, you gain a lot of enemies. Because you go against the stream. Okay? Did we read this? Let's go to that one.
The clean person will spatter the unclean on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. And on the 7th day he will purify him. And he will wash his garments, he will bathe in the waters, and in the evening he will be clean. But the man who is unclean and does not purify himself, that person will be cut off from the midst of the assembly, because he defiled the sanctuary of Adonai. The water of impurity was not sprinkled on him. He is unclean.
So it's a command. We have to do it. Okay? It will be an eternal decree for them. It has to be. So that's why it has to happen. Okay? Ezekiel 36, 24, 28. I'm going to read verse 25. It says, I will sprinkle on you pure water, and you will be clean from all your uncleanness. Now, this is one of those verses that you know what it's talking about without directly telling you what it is. How do we know? Because the word uncleanness is actually tumah. The word uncleanness right here is actually the Hebrew word tumah. If you study the levels of impurity, you know that tumah is a state of ceremonial uncleanness. Is that making sense? Okay. Now, in Daniel 12, verse 11, from the time of the regular burnt offering removed and the abomination that causes desolation set up. So therefore, we need to understand how the altar function and the offerings function. The tamid, the daily, the regular tamid in the Hebrew means tamid. That's what I read you in Numbers 28. So how would you know how the false Messiah was defiled God's sacred space if you don't know how the tamid, or the regular offering, worked. We would not know when the beginning of the Great Tribulation started. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a very interesting time. You want to know about the temple? You can learn from one of the best sources on the temple, probably the authority of the temple in the Western world. His name is Joseph Good. He's my teacher, recognized by archaeologists and teachers alike in Israel. Okay? Humble man who just wants to teach you the temple. Okay? Joseph Good. Okay? A lot of misinformation and disinformation about him. Okay? Go to the source. He's been my teacher for now 13 years. And right now he's teaching me and other people to understand these things. Instead of arguing about areas that we don't know, we should consider looking into this stuff. Matthew 24, verse 30-31, is talking in the language of the Jubilee. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, Jovel. That happens on Yom Kippur. Tabernacles is not over. Yom Teruah is the beginning of the year, or your Rosh Hashanah. There's a lot of arguments about that. If I say Rosh Hashanah, oh boy, come from Babylon. False news. By the way, do you say Aviv? How many of you have used the name Aviv because you don't want to use Nisan? You know, Nisan comes from Babylon, Nisanu. But do you know Aviv is a Canaanite word? It's a Canaanite word. It means spring. Both words mean spring. No one is worshiping the name. It just means spring. Do you wear Nike clothes? Pagan. Do you drive a Mazda? Pagan. One of the students of Paul was Apollo. Did he change his name? No one was worshiping the dude. He had the name of one of the gods of Greece. We have lost our minds trying to be so perfect in everything. We lose it. We miss it. Okay? All right. I got in trouble here. Okay. So, do you know that Yom Teruah? You know that Yom Teruah is not really the name of Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year. Yom Teruah is the name of the service, the trumpet service that occurred during the day in the temple. Rosh Hashanah means head of the year. That's when you start counting the sabbatical years and the Jubilee years. I do not celebrate Rosh Hashanah the way the Jews celebrate it as the new year in the 31st of December. I don't celebrate like that. I celebrate Yom Teruah or Rosh Hashanah the way that the Bible tells us. It's the beginning of years for the counting of the Jubilees. That's interesting that people oppose Rosh Hashanah as the beginning of the year of the Hebrew calendar in regards to the Jubilee years, but yet we're expecting Yeshua to return on the Jubilee year. And we don't know what it takes for that to happen. And worse, we don't want to deal with Rosh Hashanah as the beginning of the biblical year in regards to the counting of the Jubilee, because the agricultural year is Nisan. We know that. But then on December 31st, Happy New Year! And when December 31st is the Roman celebration of Janus, the two-faced God, and resolution was actually the way they used to do divination and things in the ancient world. If you live in Latin America, you know this. There you go. Yes, the Jubilee of the Jubilee year or the agricultural cycle. No, that's not an answer. That's not an answer. You see, I'm not going to let you slide. The head of, for what? For what? Of the feast. Okay, so do you know that the book of Deuteronomy talks about that Sukkot is the end of the year. But that's the 7th month. How can that be the end of the year? You don't end the year on the 12th month. It's on the 7th month, right? No, because you see, Nisan serves as the beginning of the agricultural cycle, because that's the geography they lived in. For the counting of the civil calendar, for the years from creation to the second coming of Messiah, you count that from Tishri 1 to Tishri 1. That's the civil. For example, do you follow a civil calendar here? Do you pay taxes when? April. Okay, it's interesting. You got to bring your first fruits to the government in April exactly the same way they used to do it back then. Do you have a calendar year for work or for school or for certain things? Do they all function together or they all overrule each other? Think about it. So why should there be any different in the Bible? So are you expecting Messiah to come in a particular time? Oh, I agree. I agree 100%. No. Which ones? Which ones are man-made? Oh, yeah, but I agree with you. We're not talking about that one. No, I'm with you on that one. We're not talking about that. Because that's what we rule. The Gregorian calendar is just what we live with now. But that's not the one we obey. We obey the one in the commandments. Yeah, but the agricultural cycle for the feast starts in Nisan, 100%. You're right. But there's also the counting of the Jubilees, and that starts in Tishri. You see, that's what I'm saying. But the Gregorian calendar, that's just what we live with to function now. But we will return to the biblical one when Messiah returns. For sure. By the way, in Israel, they go by that one. Well, again, the people who say that are not the Jewish people. The people who say that is actually people over here who don't know anything about the biblical calendar. I know, right? You know why? Because they study law. We don't. They study law. Do you ever have a complaint with Jewish people about the Sabbath? About the feast? No. They have arguments with everything else, and within Judaism, there are different branches. But never with things that are law. Because they understand the law. And this is one of them. Okay? This is one of them. The Red Heifer is one of them. In the Western world, this is what we do. The Mount of Olives. Let me ask you a question. Is Yeshua going to put his feet on the Mount of Olives? It's a cemetery right now. So it has to be purified. Okay, let's move on. So these are the steps, prophetic requirements of the second coming of Messiah that I have up to now. I may be able to add more later, okay? Make the disclaimer. 1, the Red Heifer. Let's go by having points. The requirements. What's the first one? Red Heifer, 3 to 5 years. The ones that we have are now like 24, 22, 23 months. The candidates. There are requirements for them to be eligible. My sister mentioned it. Got to have 1 or 3 hairs. That's it. They have to be completely red. Right? If they have more than 3 or 4 hairs, they're disqualified. Okay? All right. Second, the ashes for the corpse impurity, they have to, in order to do that, they have to clean the temple. So they need a location to do the slaughtering, which happens to be in the Mount of Olives. Now they have the piece of land, right? They bought it, so they have it. So now we have the heifers, we have the piece of land. But they cannot do anything with it unless they take the Temple Mount. They take the Temple Mount, then you have to clean it. You have to remove the trees, you have to do everything else, remove certain things. Then you got to get the waters of purification from the Gihon. They have it. Okay? So now you get the slaughtering, you get the ashes. Once you get the ashes, you take a priest who has to do it. We have them. You follow with the procedure? We have them. Then they go and get the waters of purification. But we got a problem. There's a little city, and the Palestinians living there, as well as Jews, walking from the southern steps all the way to the Gihon Springs, all the way down to the Shiloach. It just so happened that they discovered the pilgrimage road. It happens to be underground. And they thinking that maybe in 2 years, it'll be completely dug up all the way to the southern steps. What a coinkydinky. So now we have the heifers. We have the ashes possibly where they want to slaughter it. We have the priest. They can clean it. We have the water. We have all this stuff. Now they have the elements to measure the altar. It takes 8 days. 7 days, on the 8th day is an altar to the Lord. When they take the Temple Mount, requirement. When they build the altar, requirement. When they have the 8th day, they better make sure the priest put the tamid offering on the altar. Well, they don't believe in Yeshua, it's not valid. Where does it say that anywhere in the Bible? By the way, you know I defend Yeshua. If you still question after this weekend, there's nothing I can do for you. But I will stand forever, and I believe that when the altars are reestablished, they believe in Yeshua is not a requirement for them to do their duty. That's my point. If they believe in Yeshua, trust me, I'll be so happy. Because he will be a fulfilled of prophecy regardless. All right. So they build the altar, they put the tamid. Now I got it. I'm just got to sit down with my bag of popcorn. It's going to be televised. It's going to be televised. Trust me. The whole world is going to be it's going to be chaos. Okay, I'm just sitting in my home watching. Okay, what's next? Okay, just who's the guy who's going to come over and sit? The moment he sits, that's the false Messiah, and now the countdown starts. And then you can read the book of Revelation, you start going step by step. I know what's coming. And then you know the days. God is so wise that he prescribed it in a way that even tells you how many days to count. But you need to understand the legal ramifications of the whole thing. You need the measure of the altar, then you need the dedication, the start of the tamid, the priesthood. By the way, the new moon can no longer be declared by an American in the West Coast. A piece of advice. If the altar is dedicated tomorrow or in 10 days, whatever, it's an example, and someone tells you we're going to follow this calendar because we saw the new moon here, don't you dare follow that. It's illegal. You will be committing encroachment. You don't want to do that. Korah tried that. He died. Okay, anytime who tries to encroach on the holy things, they die. But the calendar is wrong. It doesn't matter because Numbers 18 says that if they do wrong, they bear the iniquity. They bear the responsibility. We are to proclaim it. That's law. But wait a minute. The Word of God is above everything. Exactly. That's exactly what the Word of God says. Let's go to Numbers 18. Go all the way to verse 5. Actually, let's read it together. Let me go right here real quick. Let's read it together. I got it right here, and I'm done. And if I don't stay to speak with you after, please understand, I got to go catch my flight. And I love y'all, but I want to see my family. I did not sleep at all last night. When I cannot sleep without my wife, man, it's terrible. I will, but maybe to stay a little longer. I can't do it for just 2 days, but if I stay longer, I will bring her. But it's getting to the point that I don't function without her, and I kind of like that. I love it, man. It's like I'm a mess. She's there. It's like I fall asleep. If I touch her feet, I have to touch her feet. Right? You go like that, okay, you're there. I go like that. She goes, you fall asleep so fast. I'm like out in 2 seconds, right? Because I touch it, I'm happy. Okay, I'm home. But over here, it takes me forever. Exactly, and I love that. You know how awesome that feels that I cannot function? I call her 20,000 times. You know? Go ahead, brother. Let's read it. Watch this. I want you to think about the legality while you're reading. Go ahead.
From the top.
Yes, sir.
Adonai said to Aaron, you and your sons and your family with you will bear the guilt of the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you will bear the guilt of your priesthood. Okay,
so let's look at that word avon, the guilt. The word avon is misdeed, sin, guilt, caused by sin, punishment. So God is saying if they mess up, they're the ones who bear the guilt. They are punished, not you, because you are called to proclaim. Keep going.
Moreover, bring your brothers with you, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may be joined to you and minister to you, you and your sons with you before the tent of testimony. They will keep your responsibility and the responsibility of all the tent. Only they may not come near the vessels of the sanctuary and the altar, so both you and they will not die.
You see? So God is even telling them, the Levites, they're your family, right? But by the way, if they touch the altar or anything holy that belongs to the priest, they die and you die. You see how the Levites cannot do certain things? So let me ask you this. If the Levites cannot do certain things that the priest can do, what makes you think you and I can do that? That's my premise of why I'm adamant about certain things. Guys, I'm teaching you to survive. You don't want to be encroaching on the holy things of God when the altar is dedicated. The legality will go out of the roof. Trust me, and the God is zealous for his holiness. He's not going to put up with us from the nations coming over here and telling what they should do over there. Keep going, brother. I got to hurry up.
They will be joined to you, and they will keep the responsibility of the tent of assembly for the entire service of the tent. A stranger may not come near you.
Okay, wait, stranger. Stranger is not saying Gentile. You know what it says? Illicit, unauthorized, strange, the word zar. If you're not a son of Aaron, you cannot do the job. So you can call a priesthood all you want, but when the altar is dedicated, your priesthood doesn't matter. Because God already established priesthood for the altar. Okay? I warned you. Keep going.
You will keep the responsibility of the sanctuary and the responsibility of the altar, and there will no longer be wrath on the Israelites. Look, I myself have chosen your brothers, the Levites, from the midst of the children. They are a gift to you, given from Adonai to perform the work of the tent of assembly. But you with your sons will keep your priesthood to perform your priestly duties for everything at the altar and for the area behind the curtain. I give you the priesthood as a gift, but the stranger who approaches will be put to death.
You see? I don't want to be that stranger. I will tell you about it. I'm not going to touch it. Okay? Because I respect his holiness. This is not a popular message. This goes against everything everyone does in the Hebrew roots. And that's why I've gained enemies, because I keep telling them these are holy things. We need to respect them. But you saw the evidence. Any stranger, an illicit person who approaches will be put to death. I'm in Tennessee, so you get it. Okay? If I go to your, where is he? If I go to your house, okay, how many acres you have? 17. So I go through your property about 3 in the morning, unannounced. And I try to just do something in your property. What's going to happen to me? I'm gone, right? From every angle, right? Because I'm an illicit person who went unannounced into your property, trespassing your sacred space. Now, if I call you, you give me permission. I'll tell you what kind of car I have, what time I show up. You're not going to shoot me, I hope. Okay? Because you know that I asked permission. How much more the house of God? So right now we have the great opportunity to understand the prophetic timetable. I'm not saying things will happen this way, here. No, I'm just giving you the clues. Guys, follow the steps. If you see this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, get ready for this one, this one, this one. Yes? What, repeat that again in the beginning. Yeah. No, what it says right here, look what it says. Remember the Levites? Go to verse 4. It says, let me go up. Verse 3. Let me read verse 3 and I'll explain that again. Verse 3 says, verse 2, moreover, bring your brothers with you, the Levites. Remember, all the priests are Levites. Not all the Levites are priests. All Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. Or not all Americans are Puerto Ricans. Okay? All the 10 tribes are Israelites. Or not all the Jews are Israelites, right? Okay. So it says, moreover, bring your brothers with you, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father. It's talking to the sons of Aaron. Verse 1. The Lord said to Aaron, you and your sons with your family with me. And it says, you and your sons, Aaron and his sons, with you before the tent of meeting, they will keep your responsibility, right? And the responsibility of all the tent. Only the Levites, they may not come near the vessels of the sanctuary and the altar, so both you and they are the Levites, will not die. They will be joined to you, the Levites, and they will keep the responsibility of the tent of meeting for the entire service of the tent. In other words, they will bring all the bread, all the flour, all the oil, all the animals, and they'll prepare it so when you show up, everything is ready for you to do it. Okay? And then it says, they will be joined with you. They will keep the responsibility of the tent of assembly for the entire service, and the stranger may not come near. You will keep the responsibility, verse 5, right? You will keep the responsibility of the sanctuary and the responsibility of the altar. Sanctuary means the temple building, the main building and the altar. And there will be no longer wrath on the Israelites. Look, I myself have chosen your brothers, the Levites, from the midst of the children of Israel. They are a gift to you, the priests. You see? From the Lord to perform the work of the tent of assembly. So if somebody says, oh, those priests are of Satan. Really? God ordained it. You are slandering God's authority. Okay? And then it says, but you and your sons will keep your priesthood to perform your priestly duties from everything on the altar and from behind the curtain. I give you the priesthood as a gift, but the stranger who approach shall be put to death. There's a distinction between the Levites and the priests in their function and their order in the temple. The priest can only do the work of the temple and the altar and the sacrifices. The Levites will do everything else to facilitate for them. It's a team administration. It's an effort of a team working together. That makes sense? I'm glad you asked, because I'm able to explain it better. And that's the whole idea. We owe it to a leader owes it to the audience and respect you enough that when you have a question, we do our best with what we have to share it with you. It's up to you to weigh it out and go back and validate it. Amen? May the Lord bless you, keep you, protect you, and guide you. I am honored, and I'm so happy to come to Tennessee again. I want to thank you both for setting up this meeting. Everyone that helped, thank you. Thank you for all your hospitality. And I pray that you will bring me back. I want to come back. Amen? So may the Lord bless you, keep you. Thank you, guys. And we'll see you soon, okay? All right. Yes, sir.